Hey guys, here I am once again after quite a while, I guess, doing another Tomes of Terror book review. If you hear sound in the background, it's storming outside, so I thought it lidded some ambiance, so I just decided to go ahead and record while it was going on. So this book here, I had actually noticed this book. It has an awesome cover. It's very striking. So it stood out to me a lot when I was scrolling through my Kindle. Now this book came out in 2021, and it's called This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. So, like I said, I kept seeing it all the time, and I'm like, wow, that cover is, like, really cool, and the premise, like, the couple of sentences I read sounded really interesting, so I said, I'll probably get around to reading that eventually. But then, I happened to be on a subreddit the other day. I think it was Horror Lit, and people were asking for recommendations for the best or creepiest horror novels that people had read recently, and no less than 4 separate people recommended this book. So I decided, hey, it's free on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm going to go over there and check it out. So this novel is actually Gus Moreno's first. He had written some publishing short stories early on, like in anthologies and things. This was his first full-length novel, and it was actually nominated for Reader's Favorite Horror Award on Goodreads the year it came out. And honestly, I'm not surprised. And I'm also not surprised why a bunch of people recommended this one. It's a very eerie, kind of insidiously weird kind of book. It sort of pulls you right in and takes you along on this just wild journey that's like also really unsettling. Now, not everything is spelled out, and I did see some reviewers complain that they thought the ending was too ambiguous and it wasn't clear exactly what happened. But honestly, I didn't really mind that at all. The story actually kind of left me a lot to think about after I finished, and I tend to like horror that kind of stays with you, and this one definitely did. I will also note that although the novel starts out as a sort of, and this may be a mild spoiler, I'm not really sure, so warning for that, it kind of starts out as sort of like a haunting or a possible demon possession kind of story, but as it goes on, it definitely starts shading toward cosmic horror. So whether you're down for that, that's entirely up to you. I actually really dug the direction that the story went in because it was really unexpected, but I know that some readers don't really vibe with kind of genre shifts, and this wasn't like a big huge hard left turn or anything like that, but it does kind of go into cosmic horror, and maybe if you were expecting one kind of thing and it goes the other kind of way, you might not dig that. So I'm just like telling you ahead of time. So the story is actually told from the first person perspective of a young man named Tiago Alvarez, and at times he even goes into the second person, although we find out soon enough that he isn't actually, I guess it's not technically second person because he's not actually talking to you, the reader. He's actually addressing his dead wife, Vera. And at the very beginning of the story, in fact, Tiago is at Vera's funeral, and he's, of course, trying to deal with the grief of losing, was his true love, his best friend. And he's also navigating the really kind of intrusive and largely unwanted support, I guess you'd call it, of his wife's friends and family. He seemed kind of more introverted and she was more extroverted, so he doesn't hardly know these people all that well. So it seems like a little overwhelming, that all these people are coming at him. We don't actually find out how Vera died until a bit later. But because Tiago makes reference to her death being like all over the media, we know it must have been something high profile, maybe a murder or something like that. And there are also hints that Tiago believes that there are like larger forces at play that caused Vera's death. And he starts to talk about the weird events leading up to the incident where she died as perhaps being part of some maybe complex pattern. And this pattern seemed to start, innocuously enough, with Vera buying a sort of Alexa-like virtual assistant, except it's called an Itza, or an Itza. Now, at first, when they got this thing, it was pretty fine. They thought it was pretty cute and pretty handy, you know what I mean? But shit started to get strange pretty quickly. Actually, even before, right around the time they got it, or maybe even a little bit before, in Tiago and Vera's condo, they live in Chicago, they started to notice like weird shit. Like there was all these odd noises at nights, like floorboards creaking, like somebody was walking around. There's like cold spots, kind of soft tapping on the walls, like that kind of shit. You know what I mean? Creepier still, their Itza sometimes randomly played music that seemed germane to the situation when no one asked it to. And sometimes it seemed to be answering the questions of someone who wasn't there, which that would creep me the fuck out. I don't have an Alexa, but if it started doing that, yeah, I'd probably shit a brick. So all that kind of shit was like really creepy to me because I could imagine being in that situation. How fucking weird that would be. It also starts ordering all this bizarre shit, like, of its own volition and having it delivered to their house. Like, the first thing I think was like a floppy, like a big pink dildo, which they just thought was funny, like it was a mistake. But then it kept happening, and it was always this weird shit, like a huge case of lye, like a samurai sword. It was all kind of shit like that, you know what I mean? So like I said, Tiago and Vera are initially kind of amused by this whole thing, and, you know, other people that they know that have these things, like, will tell them, it's like, oh yeah, mine orders shit, like, accidentally all the time. It's like, music comes on all the time, it does weird shit. So they're not thinking too much about it, but it just keeps happening, you know what I mean? So they start getting more and more creeped out, and it seems like this Alexa thing, is kind of more and more starting to take on maybe a life of its own. Now, you might think, because of this, that this story is going to go, like, in, you know, a haunted AI type situation, but this is not that. The shit that happens with the Alexa is mostly just, like, a symptom of, like, a much larger thing. So don't go into it thinking that it's like, oh, AI gone rogue kind of thing, because it's not like that. So, because the couple suspect now that their condo is haunted, they decide they're going to try and find the former tenant and ask her if she experienced anything paranormal, perhaps, while she lived there. But before they can do that, a freak accident, that's what happens when Vera dies. So like I said, this kind of jumps back and forth in time, because a lot of it, you know, the beginning is at the funeral, but then he's kind of like flashing back to like what led up to this point, you know what I mean? So there's this freak accident, and Tiago becomes convinced that it was engineered by whatever entity is in their condo. See, what happened was, they always set the alarm on the Itza, on the Alexa thing, so they could wake up for work, as many people do. But on this one particular day, the alarm failed to go off, even though Tiago is absolutely certain that he set it. Now, Vera overslept and had to rush to get to work. Tiago actually offered to drive her, but she's like, no, don't worry about it, I'll take the train. At the train station, though, there's this young man who had just stolen somebody's phone, like as a gang initiation or something like that, and he sort of plowed into her as she was hurrying toward the stairs, and she falls, like, full on to the bottom of the stairs, like, splitting her head open on the concrete. Now, because the kid who ran into her was an undocumented immigrant, Vera's death becomes kind of like a rallying cry for various political pundits, as it would. Even though both Tiago and Vera, I should note, are also Mexican-American. So this very public wrangling over Vera's death, like in the media, causes Tiago a lot of added distress, as it would, because he kind of feels resentful that all these other people who didn't know her are using her as a prop for their own agenda. After Vera's death, Tiago further discovers that the woman who had lived in their condo previously may have done some sort of weird black magic type of ritual, and may have summoned something, we don't know exactly what, into the world, possibly as a sort of revenge on the landlord who had her evicted. Now, at this point, it's almost kind of like I said, the story doesn't go in like a completely different direction, but it is like in another part, like, so it goes to another part at this point. So Tiago is like really sick of dealing with the circus surrounding the accident and like all the crazy shit that's still going on in the condo. So he decides to take the very generous life insurance payout that he got from Vera's death. She actually had a big life insurance thing that she didn't tell him about, so he gets a significant chunk of change. And so he takes that and he buys this really isolated cabin in the Colorado mountains to kind of get away from everything. Because like I said, he's very introverted and he doesn't really want to be around people. Now, on the way there, this is kind of where it starts getting, like, Twilight Zone-y, you know what I mean? Which is, I really liked. I thought it was kind of cool. So on the way there, he stops at this very creepy diner, like, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. And the guy, there's only one guy working there, and he said he's going to close soon. And the guy gives him a free milkshake, and the whole situation is real unsettling, like I said. And the dude that works in the diner may have some more to do with what's happening to Tiago than he initially realizes. Now, once he arrives in Colorado, he is almost immediately adopted by a very friendly St. Bernard who kind of approaches him in a parking lot of like a hardware store or something. And he tries to find the dog's owner, but nobody claims him, so Tiago takes the dog home with him and really starts to develop, you know, a very deep affection for the big lug, as you would, because like I said, he's very friendly. He actually names the dog Wilford Brimley, which I thought was fucking hilarious, just because of the faces that he makes, you know what I mean? Be warned, though, some real bad shit happens to this dog. So if you're sensitive to stuff involving animals, as I am as well, so, you know, no shame there, you might want to brace yourself, because it's pretty fucking upsetting. Now, prior to the bad shit happening, the dog actually runs off into the woods one day, and when Tiago goes to find him, he discovers this bizarre stone structure, much like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, behind his house. Now, I don't want to spoil too much about this thing and what exactly it represents, and I'm not entirely sure I know the answer to that question myself anyway. But suffice it to say that this right here is where the cosmic horror stuff really starts popping off. And the story just gets stranger and stranger, like, as it goes on. We're never completely certain how much of what Tiago is experiencing is real, or even if that means anything. But it does actually seem as though some kind of powerful entity of some type is definitely messing with him on purpose, for reasons that we really only barely comprehend. So yeah, this was a great read. I really liked this a lot. It's not in-your-face scary, but it's more kind of like a chilling, disquieting kind of vibe, and it just gets more and more disturbing as it goes on, and it really kind of lingers in your mind for a while afterward. Although, like I said, the narrative does jump back and forth in time, and as the tale goes on, like, reality increasingly starts to kind of blur around the edges. It is a really, really compelling story, and I think it's kind of grounded by this really reliable, sympathetic narrator who you really feel for, because holy crap, he goes through some shit, you know what I mean? I have to say, too, that this is also one of the most poignant and kind of gut-wrenching examinations of grief I think I've ever read. And some of Tiago's observations, like, about his feelings about his wife's death, are really fucking heartbreaking. I mean, this is a really, it's creepy, and it's also, like, really, really sad, and almost kind of profound, too, in a way. So if you're in the mood for kind of a more spooky, kind of haunting, demon possession sorta story that kind of takes a real peculiar, like, almost Lovecraftian turn toward the end, then this is an easy recommend for me, especially if you're also in the market for something that has, like, a real emotional heft to it, because that makes the horror elements, like all the stuff that happens to Tiago, the narrator, like, all that much more horrific because you care about him as a character, and that to me is, like, the true definition of horror. So this one really got to me. So that will do it for this book review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye!